Hello, and welcome to another video from the YouTube channel, From Religion to Agnostic. Riphath was great-grandson of Noah, grandson of Japheth, son of Gomer, Japheth's eldest, younger brother of Ashkenaz, and older brother of Togarmah according to the Table of Nations in the Hebrew Bible, Genesis 10:3, 1 Chronicles 1:6. The name appears in some copies of 1 Chronicles as Diphath, due to the similarities of the characters Resh and Dalet in the Hebrew and Aramaic alphabets. His identity is completely unknown. He was supposed by Flavius Josephus to have been the ancestor of the Riphathians, now called Paphlagonians. Hippolytus of Rome made him the ancestor of the Saramatians, as distinct from the Sarmatians, whom he called descendants of Riphath's elder brother, Ashkenaz. Riphath has often been connected with the Riphaean mountains of classical Greek geography, in whose foothills the Arimaspi, also called Aramphei or Riphaeans, were said to live. These were usually identified with the Ural Mountains by authors such as Pliny the Elder. August Wilhelm Noble proposed that Riphath begot the Celtic peoples, who according to Plutarch had crossed from the Riphaean mountains while en route to northern Europe. Smith's Bible Dictionary also forwards Noble's notion that the Carpathian Mountains, in the northeast of Dacia, is the site of the Riphath or Riphaean Mountains. Some versions of the Middle Irish work Lebergabula Aaron give as an alternate name, Riphath Scott, son of Gomer, in place of Phineas Farsa, as a Scythian ancestor of the Goidels. Okay, and that's about as much as I could find on Riphath, Gomer's son, the grandson of Japheth. But I do, however, want to look at what stuck out at me while reading this. Let's look at he was supposed by Flavius Josephus to have been the ancestor of the Riphathians, now called Paphlagonians. Paphlagonia was an ancient region on the Black Sea coast of north-central Anatolia, situated between Bithynia to the west and Pontus to the east, and separated from Phrygia, later, Galatia, by a prolongation to the east of the Bithynian Olympus. According to Strabo, the river Parthenius formed the western limit of the region, and it was bounded on the east by the Halys River. The name Paphlagonia is derived in the legends from Paphlagon, a son of Phaneus. The greater part of Paphlagonia is a rugged mountainous country, but it contains fertile valleys and produces a great abundance of hazelnuts and fruit, particularly plums, cherries, and pears. The mountains are clothed with dense forests, conspicuous for the quantity of boxwood that they furnish. Hence, its coasts were occupied by Greeks from an early period. Among these, the flourishing city of Sinop, founded from Miletus about 630 BC, stood preeminent. Amastris, a few miles east of the Parthenius River, became important under the rule of the Macedonian monarchs, while Amisus, a colony of Sinop situated a short distance east of the Halys River, and therefore not strictly in Paphlagonia as defined by Strabo, grew to become almost a rival of its parent city. The most considerable towns of the interior were Gangra, in ancient times the capital of the Paphlagonian kings, afterwards called Germanicopolis, situated near the frontier of Galatia, and Pompeiopolis, in the valley of the Amnias River, near extensive mines of the mineral called by Strabo sandarake, red arsenic or arsenic sulfide, largely exported from Sinop. In the time of the Hittites, Paphlagonia was inhabited by the Kashka people, whose exact ethnic relation to the Paphlagonians is uncertain. It seems perhaps that they were related to the people of the adjoining country, Cappadocia, who were speakers of one of the Anatolian branch of the Indo-European languages. Their language would appear, from Strabo's testimony, to have been distinctive. The Paphlagonians were one of the most ancient nations of Anatolia and listed among the allies of the Trojans in the Trojan War, ca 1200 BC or 1250 BC, where their king Pylaemenes and his son Harpalion perished, Iliad, 851–857. According to Homer and Livy, a group of Paphlagonians, called the Anatoi in Greek, were expelled from their homeland during a revolution. With a group of defeated Trojans under the leadership of the Trojan prince Antenor, they emigrated to the northern end of the Adriatic coast and later merged with indigenous Euganei, giving the name Venetia to the area they settled. Paphlagonians were mentioned by Herodotus among the peoples conquered by Croesus, and they sent an important contingent to the army of Xerxes in 480 BC. Xenophon speaks of them as being governed by a prince of their own, without any reference to the neighboring satraps, a freedom perhaps due to the nature of their country, with its lofty mountain ranges and difficult passes. All these rulers appear to have borne the name Pylaemenes as a sign that they claimed descent from the chieftain of that name who figures in the Iliad as leader of the Paphlagonians. Under the kingdom of Pontus at a later period, Paphlagonia passed under the control of the Macedonian kings, and after the death of Alexander the Great, it was assigned, together with Cappadocia and Mysia, to Eumenes. However, it continued to be governed by native princes until it was absorbed by the encroaching power of Pontus. The rulers of that dynasty became masters of the greater part of Paphlagonia as early as the reign of Mithridates, 302 to 266 BC, but it was not until 183 BC that Pharnaces reduced the Greek city of Sinop under their control. From that time, the whole province was incorporated into the kingdom of Pontus until the fall of Mithridates. Roman and Byzantine empires. Pompey united the coastal districts of Paphlagonia, along with the greater part of Pontus, with the Roman province of Bithynia, but left the interior of the country under the native princes, until the dynasty became extinct and the whole country was incorporated into the Roman Empire. The name was still retained by geographers, though its boundaries are not distinctly defined by the geographer Claudius Ptolemy. Paphlagonia reappeared as a separate province in the 5th century AD, Hierocles, Synctimus c. 33. In the 7th century it became part of the theme of Opsiction, and later of the Bucellarian theme, before being split off c. 820 to form a separate province once again. Okay, and again what sticks out to me, and would to anyone seriously researching the genealogy, would be 3 things. Number 1 is, Paphlagonia was an ancient region on the Black Sea coast of north-central Anatolia, situated between Bithynia to the west, and Pontus to the east, and separated from Phrygia, later, Galatia, by a prolongation to the east of the Bithynian Olympus. So I wondered, Bithynia, and Bithynian Olympus? Being a ex-man in cloth or pastor or indoctrinated sheeple, whichever, and going from that to just Hebrew scriptures to just Torah only, to now knowing this is all man words, well I needed to look into these terms I knew very little about. So number 1, let's check it. Bithynia. Bithynia was an ancient region, kingdom, and Roman province in the northwest of Asia Minor, adjoining the Sea of Marmara, the Bosporus, and the Black Sea. It bordered Mysia to the southwest, Paphlagonia to the northeast along the Pontic coast, and Phrygia to the southeast towards the interior of Asia Minor. Bithynia was an independent kingdom from the 4th century BC. Its capital Nicomedia was rebuilt on the site of ancient Astacus in 264 BC by Nicomedes I of Bithynia. Bithynia was bequeathed to the Roman Republic in 74 BC, and became united with the Pontus region as the province of Bithynia et Pontus. In the 7th century it was incorporated into the Byzantine Opsiction theme. It became a border region to the Seljuk Empire in the 13th century, and was eventually conquered by the Ottoman Turks between 1325 and 1333. Several major cities sat on the fertile shores of the Propontis, which is now known as Sea of Marmara, Nicomedia, Chalcedon, Seus, and Apamea. Bithynia also contained Nicaea, noted for being the birthplace of the Nicene Creed. According to Strabo, Bithynia was bounded on the east by the river Sangarius, modern Sakarya River, but the more commonly received division extended it to the Parthenius, which river separated it from Paphlagonia, thus comprising the district inhabited by the Mariandini. On the west and southwest it was separated from Mysia by the river Rindicus, and on the south it adjoined Phrygia and Galatia. It is occupied by mountains and forests, but has valleys and coastal districts of great fertility. The most important mountain range is the so-called Mysian Olympus, 8,000 feet, 2,500 m, which towers above Bursa and is clearly visible as far away as Istanbul, 70 miles, 113 kilometers. Its summits are covered with snow for a great part of the year. East of this the range extends for more than 100 miles, 160 kilometers, from the Sakarya to Paphlagonia. Both of these ranges are part of the border of mountains which bound the great tableland of Anatolia, Turkey. The broad tract which projects towards the west as far as the shores of the Bosporus, though hilly and covered with forests, the Turkish Agak Denizi, or the Sea of Trees, is not traversed by any mountain chain. The west coast is indented by 2 deep inlets, the northernmost, the Gulf of Izmit, ancient Gulf of Astacus, penetrating between 40 and 50 miles, 65 to 80 kilometers, into the interior as far as Izmit, ancient Nicomedia, separated by an isthmus of only about 25 miles, 40 kilometers, from the Black Sea, and the Gulf of Mudania or Jmlik, Gulf of Sius, about 25 miles, 40 km, long. At its extremity is situated the small town of Jmlik, ancient Sius, at the mouth of a valley, communicating with the lake of Iznik, on which was situated Nicaea. The principal rivers are the Sangarios, which traverses the province from down to north, the Rindicus, which separated it from Mysia, and the Bilius, Philios, which rises in the Aladag, about 50 miles, 80 kilometers, from the sea, and after flowing by modern Bolu, ancient Bithynian Claudiopolis, falls into the Euxine, close to the ruins of the ancient Tium, about 40 miles, 64 kilometers, northeast of Heraclea Pontica, the modern Caridanes Aragli, having a course of more than 100 miles, 160 kilometers. The Parthenius, modern Barden, the eastern boundary of the province, is a much less considerable stream. The valleys towards the Black Sea abound in fruit trees of all kinds, such as oranges, while the valley of the Sangarius and the plains near Bursa and Iznik, Nicaea, are fertile and well cultivated. Extensive plantations of mulberry trees supply the silk for which Bursa has long been celebrated, and which is manufactured there on a large scale. As always, links are in the description box below for further research. Let's move on. Number 2. Its coasts were occupied by Greeks from an early period. Among these, the flourishing city of Sinop. Now in my research I have ran across this name, Sinop, before, one being the Sinop Gospels. So let's check it. Sinop, Turkey. Sinop is a city with a population of 219,733 on the Isthmus of Innsbruck, Cape Ince, near Cape Sinop, Sinop Burnu, Boztepe Cape, Burnu, which is situated on the northernmost edge of the Turkish side of the Black Sea coast, in the ancient region of Paphlagonia, in modern-day northern Turkey. The city serves as the capital of Sinop province. The history of Sinop, Turkey. Over a period of approximately 2,500 years, Sinop has at various times been settled by Colchians, Greeks, in the late 7th, late 5th, and 4th 3rd centuries BC, by Romans in the mid-1st century BC, and by Turkic people beginning in the 12th century. In the 19th and 20th centuries it was also settled by the Muhasir who immigrated from the Balkans and Caucasus. Evidence for Hittite kingdom settlement along the Black Sea's southern shore remains murky. Researchers in the 1940s and 50s debated whether the Great Sea, mentioned on the Boghaskoy tablets describing war between the Kizawatna tribe and the Hittites, could mean the Black Sea. Albrecht Goetz argued that the Hittites had never reached the northern Black Sea shore, instead drawing the northernmost boundary of the Hittite kingdom to the south of the North Anatolia mountain range. D.S. Hogarth similarly concluded that the northern boundary of the Hittites never reached the shore. Hogarth's boundary was based on the distribution of Hittite monuments. Some objects found at Sinop are believed to be of Hittite origin. The Greek colony of Sinop was founded by Ionians from the city of Miletus. Sinop issued its own coinage, founded colonies, and gave its name to a red earth pigment called Sinopia, which was mined in Cappadocia for use throughout the ancient world. Some scholars have dated the earliest Greek colonization of Sinop to the 7th CBC, while others have proposed an earlier date in the 8th C. While literary evidence exists supporting earlier settlement, archaeological evidence has been found of Greek settlement around the Black Sea region beginning in the late 7th century. Sinop was strategically located among the trade routes that were developing on the southern coast of the Black Sea, but remained relatively isolated from other inland communities until the 4th century BC. There is literary evidence of early links between Colchis and Sinop in mythological tradition. Strabos writings link the legendary founder of Sinop, Autolycus, with Jason and the Argonauts. Polybius described Sinop as being on the way to Phasis. The Persian Achaemenid Empire's northward expansion in the 4th century disrupted Sinop's control over its eastern colonies, including Trapezus, present-day Trabzon. The satrap Datames briefly occupied the city around 375 BC. There is archaeological evidence of increased economic activity between the port city of Sinop and the surrounding inland areas during between 4th and 1st CBC. Sinop appears to have maintained its independence from the dominion of Alexander the Great, and with the help of Rhodes turned back an assault led by Mithridates II of Pontus in 220 BC. Sinop eventually fell to Pharnaces I in 183 BC, after which it became the capital of the Pontic kingdom. The Roman general Lucullus conquered Sinop in 70 BC, and Julius Caesar established a Roman colony there, Colonia Julia Felix, in 47 BC. Mithridates Eupator was born and buried at Sinop, and it was the birthplace of Diogenes, of Diphilus, poet and actor of the New Attic comedy, of the historian Batten, and of the Christian heretic of the 2nd century AD, Marcion. And there it is, did you catch that? There is the name I find the most when hearing or finding anything that has to do with Sinop, or the Sinop Gospels, Marcion. Number 3. All these rulers appear to have borne the name Pylaemenes as a sign that they claimed descent from the chieftain of that name who figures in the Iliad as leader of the Paphlagonians. So let's check the Iliad. The Iliad, sometimes referred to as the Song of Ilion or Song of Ilium, is an ancient Greek epic poem in dactylic hexameter, traditionally attributed to Homer. Usually considered to have been written down circa the 8th century BC, the Iliad is among the oldest extant works of Western literature, along with the Odyssey, another epic poem attributed to Homer which tells of Odysseus' experiences after the events of the Iliad. In the modern Vulgate, the standard accepted version, the Iliad contains 15,693 lines, divided into 24 books. It is written in Homeric Greek, a literary amalgam of Ionic Greek and other dialects. It is usually grouped in the epic cycle. Set during the Trojan War, the 10-year siege of the city of Troy, Ilium, by a coalition of Mycenaean Greek states, Achaeans, it tells of the battles and events during the weeks of a quarrel between King Agamemnon and the warrior Achilles. Although the story covers only a few weeks in the final year of the war, the Iliad mentions or alludes to many of the Greek legends about the siege, the earlier events, such as the gathering of warriors for the siege, the cause of the war, and related concerns tend to appear near the beginning. Then the epic narrative takes up events prophesied for the future, such as Achilles' imminent death and the fall of Troy, although the narrative ends before these events take place. However, as these events are prefigured and alluded to more and more vividly, when it reaches an end the poem has told a more or less complete tale of the Trojan War. In the literary Trojan War of the Iliad, the Olympian gods, goddesses, and minor deities fight among themselves and participate in human warfare, often by interfering with humans to counter other gods. Unlike their portrayals in Greek religion, Homer's portrayal of gods suited his narrative purpose. The gods in traditional thought of 4th century Athenians were not spoken of in terms familiar to us from Homer. The classical era historian Herodotus says that Homer and Hesiod, his contemporary, were the first writers to name and describe the gods' appearance and character. Mary Lefkowitz, 2003, discusses the relevance of divine action in the Iliad, attempting to answer the question of whether or not divine intervention is a discrete occurrence, for its own sake, or if such godly behaviors are mere human character metaphors. The intellectual interest of classic-era authors, such as Thucydides and Plato, was limited to their utility as a way of talking about human life rather than a description or a truth, because, if the gods remain religious figures, rather than human metaphors, their existence, without the foundation of either dogma or a Bible of faiths, then allowed Greek culture the intellectual breadth and freedom to conjure gods fitting any religious function they required as a people. The religion had no founder and was not the creation of an inspired teacher, which were popular origins of existing religions in the world. The individuals were free to believe what they wanted, as the Greek religion was created out of a consensus of the people. These beliefs coincide to the thoughts about the gods in polytheistic Greek religion. Adkins and Pollard, 2020/1998, agree with this by saying, the early Greeks personalized every aspect of their world, natural and cultural, and their experiences in it. The earth, the sea, the mountains, the rivers, custom law, themis, and one's share in society and its goods were all seen in personal as well as naturalistic terms. As a result of this thinking, each god or goddess in polytheistic Greek religion is attributed to an aspect of the human world. For example, Poseidon is the god of the sea, Aphrodite is the goddess of beauty, Ares is the god of war, and so on and so forth for many other gods. This is how Greek culture was defined, as many Athenians felt the presence of their gods through divine intervention in significant events in their lives. Oftentimes they found these events to be mysterious and inexplicable. Psychologist Julian Jaynes, 1976, uses the Iliad as a major piece of evidence for his theory of the bicameral mind, which posits that until about the time described in the Iliad, humans had a far different mentality from present-day humans. He says that humans during that time were lacking what we today call consciousness. He suggests that humans heard and obeyed commands from what they identified as gods, until the change in human mentality that incorporated the motivating force into the conscious self. He points out that almost every action in the Iliad is directed, caused, or influenced by a god, and that earlier translations show an astonishing lack of words suggesting thought, planning, or introspection. Those that do appear, he argues, are misinterpretations made by translators imposing a modern mentality on the characters. Some scholars believe that the gods may have intervened in the mortal world because of quarrels they may have had among each other. Homer interprets the world at this time by using the passion and emotion of the gods to be determining factors of what happens on the human level. An example of one of these relationships in the Iliad occurs between Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite. In the final book of the poem Homer writes, "He offended Athena and Hera, both goddesses." Athena and Hera are envious of Aphrodite because of a beauty pageant on Mount Olympus in which Paris chose Aphrodite to be the most beautiful goddess over both Hera and Athena. Wolfgang Kohlmann further goes on to say, Hera's and Athena's disappointment over the victory of Aphrodite in the judgment of Paris determines the whole conduct of both goddesses in the Iliad and is the cause of their hatred for Paris, the judge, and his town Troy. Hera and Athena then continue to support the Achaean forces throughout the poem because Paris is part of the Trojans, while Aphrodite aids Paris and the Trojans. The emotions between the goddesses often translate to actions they take in the mortal world. For example, in Book 3 of the Iliad, Paris challenges any of the Achaeans to a single combat and Menelaus steps forward. Menelaus was dominating the battle and was on the verge of killing Paris. Now he would have hauled him off and won undying glory, but Aphrodite, Zeus's daughter, was quick to the mark, snapped the rawhide strap. Aphrodite intervened out of her own self-interest to save Paris from the wrath of Menelaus because Paris had helped her to win the beauty pageant. The partisanship of Aphrodite towards Paris induces constant intervention by all of the gods, especially to give motivational speeches to their respective protégés, while often appearing in the shape of a human being they are familiar with. This connection of emotions to actions is just one example out of many that occur throughout the poem. Okay, and so I do want to state before we end the video that please, I can't state this enough, use other source materials, like the Jewish Encyclopedia, Google, Smith's Dictionary, Sefaria, OpenBible.com, and others. Don't just stick to one source and call it truth. Find a search engine and platform you can use and start your research. Like me, I use Wikipedia as my basis and extend from there, looking at everything Gnostic, biblical, fairytale, etc. Folks, cognitive dissonance is a very real thing, and it will indeed hang you up from going further, if you let it. It will hinder you from finding truth. Alrighty, and that will do it for this video. Catch you on the next one. Have a great day, and be safe. If you enjoyed this video, please think about subscribing, as well as hitting the like and sharing would help out a lot. Thank you all. Peace out, people.